The mighty Zik-Sarian Empire. In the vast expanse of the Galactic Coalition's historical archives, there exists a rather amusing footnote about the mighty Zarian Empire. You know, the one that thought they were the greatest things since sliced antimatter. Their official documentation starts with, "We, the most enlightened species in all creation," which really tells you everything you need to know about these folks. The Zik-Sarian, with their crystalline bodies and self-illuminating neural pathways, because apparently, regular bodies weren't fancy enough, had spent the last 3 millennia conquering and enlightening every species they encountered. Their favorite pastime? Writing extremely long-winded speeches about their technological superiority while looking down their luminescent noses at everyone else. High Commander Zik-Saddle stood aboard the bridge of the Imperial flagship, the Eternal Brilliance, subtle, right, his crystalline form pulsing with the usual mix of smugness and self-importance. The ship's name was etched in 23 different languages because heaven forbid someone in the galaxy didn't know who they were. Another successful integration, Commander, reported First Officer at Nival, her neural pathways glowing with what could only be described as bureaucratic satisfaction. The mindless ones of Sector 7 have accepted our supremacy and agreed to learn proper table manners. Zik-Saddle's crystal lattice structure vibrated with approval. Excellent. Add it to the beings we've enlightened count. What's the total now? 3,422 species, sir. Each one more grateful than the last. The sarcasm in that last statement would have been obvious to anyone except the Zarian, who were about as good at detecting irony as a black hole was at spitting things back out. It was at this precise moment that Lieutenant RX-FY burst onto the bridge, his usually perfectly aligned crystal facets in complete disarray, a sight so shocking that several junior officers nearly cracked their outer shells. High Commander. We've received reports from the Outer Rim. There's a new species there. He paused, his light patterns flickering with distress. They're different. Zik-Saddle's superiority gland throbbed with anticipation. Different? You mean they don't acknowledge our obvious superiority yet? How charmingly primitive. Tell me more. They call themselves humans, sir, and they. RX-FY's voice dropped to a whisper. They don't make sense. The bridge crew's collective luminescence dimmed slightly. In Zik-Sarian culture, not making sense was right up there with poor posture and improper mineral consumption. Explain, commanded Zik-Saddle, already mentally composing the first draft of his, "Why we're better than you," speech. Well, sir, they've barely mastered interstellar travel, yet they've already established colonies on 17 worlds. They have no natural defenses, no evolutionary advantages, and their bodies are mostly water, which is just inefficient if you ask me, but somehow. RX-FY's crystals pulsed with confusion. Somehow, they're thriving. First Officer Val interjected, perhaps they simply haven't had the privilege of proper guidance yet. What's their classification? That's just it, sir. RX-FY pulled out a data crystal. Our analysis computers tried to classify them, and he inserted the crystal into the main viewer. This happened. The machine started playing something called error.exe and displayed an image of what they believed was a terrestrial feline with poor spelling habits. High Commander Zik-Saddle's perfect crystalline structure flickered with what might have been the first hint of uncertainty in 3,000 years. Impossible. Everything can be classified. Everything can be categorized. Everything can be, he paused dramatically, enlightened. Little did the mighty Zarian Empire know, but this was the beginning of what would later be known as the Great Humbling, though humans would simply call it that time we made the Crystal People have an existential crisis. As reports continued to flood in about these peculiar beings who defied every logical classification system, High Commander Zik-Saddle made a decision. They would make official first contact with these humans. After all, how challenging could it be to enlighten a species that hadn't even figured out how to evolve beyond their primitive carbon-based forms? The universe, with its cosmic sense of humor, must have been laughing its celestial head off at that moment. Because if there's one thing more dangerous than a human doing something crazy, it's an alien empire that doesn't yet know that humans do crazy things. Preparation for first contact with the humans was a grand affair. Teams of Zarian xenobiologists, cultural analysts, and Enlightenment specialists worked tirelessly to compile a comprehensive report on this new species. The result was a towering monolith of bureaucratic jargon that managed to say both everything and nothing at the same time. The executive summary alone was longer than most species' entire historical records. In conclusion, High Commander Zik Saddle read aloud from the report, "While the humans appear to be a highly illogical and inefficient species, we are confident that with proper Zarian guidance, they too can be uplifted to a state of crystalline perfection." The bridge crew pulsed with approval, their facets glowing with the self-assured certainty that only comes from never having been proven wrong. "Prepare the Enlightenment fleet," Zik Saddle commanded. "We depart for human space in one standard cycle." As the Zarian ships streaked through the cosmos, their hulls shimmering with the reflected light of 1,000 stars, High Commander Zik Saddle couldn't help but feel a twinge of something unfamiliar. It wasn't doubt, of course. Zarians didn't do doubt. But it was a sort of unease. A nagging sense that maybe, just maybe, they were about to encounter something truly unprecedented. He quickly dismissed the thought. After all, the Zarian Empire had enlightened over 3,000 species. What could one more possibly do to challenge their supremacy? Oh, if only he knew. The day of first contact arrived with all the pomp and circumstance the Zarian Empire could muster, which, considering they literally glowed with self-importance, was quite a lot. The diplomatic vessel Resplendent Wisdom hung in orbit around neutral space station Gamma 9, its crystalline hull casting rainbow reflections that absolutely nobody had asked for. High Commander Zik Saddle had spent 3 standard cycles practicing his "Welcome to Enlightenment" speech. It was a masterpiece of condescension wrapped in a thin veneer of diplomatic pleasantries, perfected over millennia of first contact scenarios. He stood in the station's grand reception hall, surrounded by his equally sparkly entourage, waiting for the human delegation to arrive. What nobody expected was for the human ship to show up blasting something called rock music on all frequencies. "Sir." First Officer N. Val's voice crackled with distress. They're dancing. While docking. Is this some form of ritual combat?" Before Zik Saddle could respond, the airlock cycled open, and in walked, or rather, sauntered, Ambassador Kai Reynolds, wearing what appeared to be a formal diplomatic uniform on top and something called flip-flops on their feet. The entire Zarian delegation's luminescence flickered in synchronized horror. "Yo!" Ambassador Reynolds called out, grinning broadly. "Love what you've done with yourselves. Very disco." They gestured at the Zarians' naturally glowing forms. Zik Saddle's carefully prepared speech shattered like cheap crystal. We, you. For the first time in recorded history, a Zik Zarian was speechless. "Oh man, are you okay?" Reynolds asked, genuinely concerned. "You're kind of flickering there. Need some WD-40 for your sparkle?" First Officer N. Val leaned toward her commander and whispered, "Sir, our universal translators must be malfunctioning. None of these words make sense." Reynolds pulled out a small metallic container. "Anyone want some coffee? Always helps me through these diplomatic thingamajigs." The word thingamajig caused 3 junior Zarian diplomats to develop stress fractures. Ambassador Reynolds, Zik Saddle finally managed, drawing himself up to his full height and activating his most condescending glow pattern. "We have prepared a 17-hour presentation on the superiority of Zarian culture and your species' need for enlightenment." 17 hours. Reynolds whistled. "That's going to require way more coffee." "Hey, quick question, do you guys photosynthesize with all that glowing? Because that would be super cool." The scientific advisor in the Zarian delegation actually cracked and had to be escorted out for emergency recrystallization. As Zix Saddle attempted to begin his presentation, Reynolds casually pulled out something called a fidget spinner and began playing with it. The sight of the spinning, whirring contraption was so utterly foreign to the Zarians that several of them started to flicker erratically, their crystal matrices struggling to process this affront to their sensibilities. "I must insist that you pay attention." Zix Saddle snapped, his usually pristine vocal resonance distorted by frustration. "This is vital information for your species' advancement." "Oh, totally, my dude," Reynolds said, pocketing the fidget spinner. "Lay it on me. I'm all ears." "Well, not literally. That would be weird. But, you know, metaphorically." And so began the most surreal first contact in Zarian history. Over the next 17 hours, High Commander Zix Saddle delivered his speech, punctuated by Ambassador Reynolds' commentary, questions, and occasional snack breaks. By the end of it, the Zarians were thoroughly frazzled. Their perfectly structured worldview had been challenged by the humans' casual irreverence, their seemingly inexhaustible supply of bizarre idioms, and their infuriating ability to find humor in the most serious of matters. As the human delegation departed, promising to catch up soon, High Commander Zix Saddle found himself in a state of crystalline confusion. This was not how first contact was supposed to go. The humans were supposed to be awed, humbled, and grateful for the Zarians' guidance. Instead, they seemed amused. As if the Zarians were some quaint curiosity, a shiny bauble to be admired but not necessarily taken seriously. It was almost as if the humans didn't care about the Zarian superiority. The thought was so alien, so utterly inconceivable, that Zix Saddle felt a crack begin to form in his perfectly polished certainty. Little did he know, this was only the beginning. The humans, with their strange ways and their infuriating ability to defy categorization, were about to turn the Zarian Empire's neatly ordered universe upside down. And the Zarians, for all their advanced technology and self-proclaimed enlightenment, were woefully unprepared for the chaos that was about to ensue. Close encounters of the absurd kind. In the wake of the disastrous first contact with the humans, the Zarian Empire found itself in a state of disarray. High Commander Zix Saddle, still reeling from the encounter with Ambassador Reynolds, called an emergency meeting of the Enlightenment Council. "This cannot stand," he declared, his crystalline form pulsing with agitation. "These humans, with their illogical behavior and their fidget spinners, they must be studied and brought into the fold." The council members flickered in agreement, their facets glinting with determination. "We shall send our top researchers to observe and analyze their culture," one counselor suggested. "Surely, with enough data, we can find a way to categorize and enlighten them." And so, the Zarian Empire launched its most ambitious anthropological study to date, Operation Human Enlightenment. Teams of Zarian researchers were dispatched to Earth, tasked with immersing themselves in human society and reporting back on their findings. Little did they know, they were in for the shock of their shimmering lives. Zix Kroll, a rising star in the field of xenoanthropology, stepped out of his cloaked research vessel and onto the surface of Earth. He had been chosen to lead the mission due to his impressive record of cultural assimilation and his unflappable commitment to the Zarian way of life. As he activated his human disguise matrix, his crystalline form shimmered and rearranged itself into a passable imitation of a human male. He consulted his data pad, which contained a wealth of information on human customs and behaviors, all meticulously compiled from the Empire's vast network of spy drones. "All right," he said to his team, "according to our intel, this is a typical human greeting." He cleared his throat and spoke in what he believed to be a perfect imitation of human speech. "Greetings, fellow Earthlings. I am a normal human person, just like you. Let us engage in standard human activities and conversation." The other Zarians nodded, their human disguises mirroring Zix Kroll's stiff, unnatural movements. They set off towards the nearest human settlement, determined to blend in and gather valuable data. What followed was a series of increasingly bizarre and hilarious misunderstandings as the Zarians attempted to navigate the complexities of human culture. At a local diner, Zix Kroll attempted to order breakfast using his data pad's pre-programmed, casual human dialogue feature. "Greetings, food service worker," he said to the bemused waitress. "I would like to consume one serving of your finest slam dunk breakfast combo. Make sure the eggs are sunny side up and the bacon is crispy AF. That is how we normal humans prefer our morning sustenance." The waitress, a no-nonsense woman named Darlene, raised an eyebrow. "You want the what now?" Zix Kroll faltered, his disguise matrix flickering slightly. I apologize. Perhaps I misspoke. Allow me to rephrase using standard human vernacular." He consulted his data pad again. "Yo, home slice. Hook a brother up with some grub, ya dig?" Darlene stared at him for a long moment before sighing and jotting down his order. "One breakfast platter, coming up. You just sit tight, hon, and maybe ease up on the slang, okay? It's a bit much." As Zix Kroll sat down, thoroughly confused, his team members were having their own misadventures. Zix Trin, a specialist in human technology, had become fascinated by a device the humans called a smartphone. She had managed to acquire one and was now poking at the screen with increasing frustration. "Primitive human interface," she muttered. "Why won't you respond to my neural uplink commands?" A teenage boy sitting nearby looked over and laughed. "Dude, you gotta use your fingers. Here, let me show you." Zix Trin watched in amazement as the boy swiped and tapped at the screen, navigating through apps and menus with ease. "Incredible," she whispered. "The humans have developed a form of digital telepathy that requires physical contact. I must document this." Meanwhile, Zix Kor, the team's expert on human social customs, had wandered into a nearby park. He was attempting to engage in what his data pad described as friendly human banter, with a group of children playing on the swings. "Greetings, miniature humans," he called out. "I, too, enjoy the kinetic motion of this primitive pendulum device. Observe as I demonstrate my mastery of its oscillatory properties." With that, he leaped onto a swing and began pumping his legs with wild abandon, his human disguise flickering and glitching as he swung higher and higher. The children stared in awe for a moment before bursting into giggles. "Mommy, look," one little girl cried. "That man is swinging like a crazy person." Her mother, who had been watching the spectacle with a mixture of amusement and concern, walked over to Zix Kor. The unenlightenment. In the cycles following the Zarian researchers' return from Earth, the Enlightenment Council found itself in a state of disarray. The once unshakable belief in their own superiority had been cracked, and doubt had begun to seep into the very core of their crystalline beings. High Commander Zix Saddle, in particular, was struggling to come to terms with this new reality. He had always been the staunchest advocate for the Zarian way of life, the most fervent believer in their divine right to enlighten the lesser species of the galaxy. But now, faced with the humans and their infuriating resistance to categorization, he found himself questioning everything he had ever known. "This cannot be," he muttered to himself as he paced the halls of the council chambers. "We are the Zarian Empire. We are the pinnacle of enlightenment. How can one measly species throw us into such chaos?" As if in answer to his question, a holographic projection of Ambassador Reynolds appeared before him. "Zix, my man," the human exclaimed, their perpetual grin firmly in place. "I heard you and your council have been having some deep thoughts lately. Care to share with the class?" Zix Saddle's facets pulsed with irritation. "Ambassador Reynolds. I should have known you would be monitoring our communications." Reynolds shrugged. "Hey, it's not my fault you guys broadcast your existential crises on an open channel. But seriously, what's eating you? Is it because you finally realized that the universe doesn't revolve around the Zarian way of doing things?" The High Commander's form flickered with a mixture of anger and resignation. "It is not that simple, human. Our entire society is built upon the belief that we are the most enlightened beings in the galaxy. If that belief is shaken, what does that mean for us?" Reynolds' expression softened. It means you have an opportunity to grow, Zix. To learn. To change. That's what being alive is all about. Zix Saddle considered this for a moment. But, how do we do that? How do we reconcile our way of life with the chaos and absurdity that your species embodies? The ambassador grinned. Easy. You stop trying to force everyone else to fit into your little boxes and start appreciating the beauty of diversity. You open yourself up to new ideas, new ways of being. You learn to laugh at yourself a little. The High Commander's form pulsed with confusion. Laugh at ourselves. But, we are the Zarian Empire. We do not laugh. Reynolds snorted. Well, maybe it's time you started. Trust me, a little laughter goes a long way. It helps you keep things in perspective. With that, the ambassador's hologram winked out, leaving Zix Saddle alone with his thoughts. Laugh at themselves. Open themselves up to new ideas. It all sounded so alien. But then again, wasn't that the point? Over the next several cycles, the Zarian Empire began a slow, tentative process of cultural exchange with the humans. Ambassador Reynolds and their team were invited to the Zarian homeworld to give a series of presentations on human culture, history, and philosophy. At first, the Zarians approached these lectures with their usual air of superiority, certain that they would find nothing of value in the humans' primitive ramblings. But as they listened, they found themselves drawn in by the sheer diversity and complexity of human thought. From the ancient Greeks' love of debate and inquiry to the existentialists grappling with the absurdity of existence, the humans seemed to have a knack for asking the big questions, and coming up with a dizzying array of answers. But how do you know which answer is correct? One Zarian council member asked after a particularly mind-bending lecture on quantum physics and the nature of reality. Ambassador Reynolds shrugged. We don't, really. That's kind of the point. We keep asking questions, keep exploring, keep challenging our assumptions. It's a never-ending process. The Zarians murmured amongst themselves, their facets flickering with a mix of confusion and excitement. This was a way of thinking that was entirely foreign to them, but also strangely appealing. As the cultural exchange continued, the Zarians began to experiment with incorporating human ideas and practices into their own society. They set up debate clubs and philosophy circles, encouraging their citizens to question and challenge the status quo. They even started to dabble in the human art of humor, much to the delight of Ambassador Reynolds. Why did the Zarian cross the wormhole? One council member asked during a particularly memorable session. The others stared at him blankly. To get to the other side, the council member exclaimed, his facets pulsing with mirth. There was a moment of stunned silence, and then, slowly, hesitantly, the other Zarians began to flicker with laughter. It was a small thing, a silly joke that would have barely registered with a human audience. But for the Zarians, it was a revelation. They could laugh. They could find joy in the absurd, the illogical, the unexpected. And in that laughter, they found a glimmer of something they had never known before, humility. Of course, not all Zarians were thrilled with this new direction. There were some who clung stubbornly to the old ways, insisting that the humans were a dangerous influence that would lead to the downfall of their great empire. Chief among these traditionalists was Zix Kroll, the researcher who had led the initial mission to study the humans. This is madness, he declared during a heated council meeting. We are the Zarian Empire. We cannot allow ourselves to be swayed by the primitive philosophies of a lesser species. High Commander Zix Saddle, who had become an increasingly vocal advocate for the cultural exchange, fixed Zix Kroll with a steady gaze. Lesser species, he asked quietly. Tell me, Zix Kroll, what makes us greater than the humans? Our technology. Our enlightenment. Zix Kroll's facets pulsed with certainty. Of course. We have achieved a level of perfection that the humans can only dream of. Zix Saddle shook his head. Perfection? No, Zix Kroll. What we have achieved is stagnation. We have become so convinced of our own superiority that we have forgotten how to learn, how to grow, how to change. The High Commander's form shimmered with a new intensity. The humans, for all their chaos and absurdity, have something we lack, a willingness to embrace the unknown, to take risks, to be wrong. And in that willingness, they have found a kind of strength that we can only marvel at. Zix Kroll's facets flickered with uncertainty. But, what does that mean for us? Are we to abandon our way of life entirely? To become like the humans? Zix Saddle smiled. No, Zix Kroll. We are not humans, and we should not try to be. But we can learn from them. We can incorporate their wisdom into our own, create a new way of being that is uniquely Zarian, but also open to the wonders of the universe. The council chamber fell silent as the Zarians contemplated their High Commander's words. It was a moment of profound change, of paradigm shift. And in that moment, the Zarian Empire began to transform. Over the cycles that followed, the Zarians continued to evolve and adapt, blending human ideas with their own unique culture and traditions. They learned to embrace diversity, to celebrate the quirks and eccentricities that made each individual special. They even started to develop their own brand of humor, a dry, deadpan style that played on their love of logic and precision. Why was the Zarian mathematician late to the council meeting? One popular joke went. Because he was stuck on a particularly tricky proof. It was a small thing, a silly thing, but it represented a profound shift in the Zarian psyche. They had learned to laugh at themselves, to find joy in the imperfections and absurdities of life. And in that laughter, they found a new kind of enlightenment. As for High Commander Zix Saddle, he became a symbol of this new, more open-minded Zarian Empire. He formed a close friendship with Ambassador Reynolds, and the two could often be found deep in conversation, debating the finer points of human and Zarian philosophy. You know, Zix, Reynolds said one day as they strolled through the crystalline gardens of the council chambers, I'm really proud of how far you guys have come. I mean, when we first met, you were kind of a stick in the mud. Zix Saddle's facets pulsed with amusement. A stick in the mud? Is that another one of your colorful human idioms? Reynolds grinned. Yep. It means you were too serious, too rigid. But look at you now. Cracking jokes, questioning your assumptions, embracing the unknown. You've really loosened up. The High Commander's form shimmered with a mix of pride and humility. I have the humans to thank for that, Ambassador. You have shown us a new way of being, a new path to enlightenment. Reynolds shook their head. Nah, Zix. You guys did that all on your own. We just gave you a little nudge in the right direction. Zix Saddle considered this for a moment. Perhaps. But sometimes a little nudge is all it takes to change the course of an entire civilization. The two friends looked out over the shimmering city below, a testament to the power of open-mindedness, of curiosity, of change. And in that moment, the Zarian Empire knew that it would never be the same again. But then again, wasn't that the point? The Enlightenment spreads. As the Zarian Empire continued to evolve and adapt under the influence of human ideas, High Commander Zix Saddle knew that it was time to share their newfound wisdom with the rest of the galaxy. We have been given a great gift, he declared to the Enlightenment Council. A gift of perspective, of humility, of growth. It is our duty to share this gift with others, to help them break free from the chains of their own rigid thinking. The council members pulsed with agreement, their facets shimmering with excitement at the prospect of a new kind of galactic outreach. But where do we start? Asked one council member. There are so many species, so many cultures. How do we know which ones are ready for our message? Zix Saddle smiled. We start with the ones who are most like us. The ones who are convinced of their own superiority, who believe that they have all the answers. For it is they who need our help the most. And so, the Zarian Empire began a new phase of its existence, not as conquerors or enlighteners, but as teachers and guides. They reached out to species across the galaxy, sharing their story of transformation and inviting them to join in the great cosmic dance of learning and growth. At first, many were resistant. The Zarians' reputation as arrogant, inflexible beings was well known, and few were willing to listen to their newfound message of open-mindedness. But slowly, gradually, the tide began to turn. Species that had once looked upon the Zarians with fear and resentment now saw them in a new light. They saw a people who had been humbled by their own limitations, who had learned to embrace the unknown and the unpredictable. And in that humility, they found a new kind of strength. One of the first species to welcome the Zarians' new approach was the Klaxians, a race of hyper-intelligent but notoriously aloof beings who had long believed themselves to be the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. When Zix-Saddle and his delegation arrived on the Klaxian homeworld, they were greeted with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. "The great Zarian Empire, come to teach us the error of our ways," the Klaxian High Chancellor asked, her metallic eyebrows arched in amusement. "This should be interesting." Zix-Saddle bowed respectfully. "Not to teach, High Chancellor, but to learn. We have discovered that true wisdom comes not from imposing one's beliefs on others, but from opening oneself up to new ideas and perspectives." The High Chancellor's eyes widened in surprise. "Well, well. It seems the mighty Zarians have indeed changed. Very well, then. We will hear what you have to say." Over the next several cycles, the Zarians and the Klaxians engaged in a series of lively debates and discussions, each side challenging the other to question their assumptions and explore new ways of thinking. The Klaxians were particularly fascinated by the concept of humor, which had always been a foreign concept to their hyper-rational minds. "So, you're saying that the purpose of a joke is to create a cognitive dissonance that results in a physiological response of laughter?" one Klaxian scholar asked during a particularly intense discussion. Zix-Saddle's facets pulsed with amusement. "In a sense, yes. But it's more than that. Humor helps us to see the absurdity and irony in life, to find joy in the unexpected and the illogical." The scholar's metallic brow furrowed in concentration. "Fascinating. And you say that this laughter response is enjoyable?" Zix-Saddle nodded. "Indeed. It is one of the great pleasures of existence." The scholar's eyes lit up with a sudden realization. "Then, perhaps we have been approaching the pursuit of knowledge all wrong. Perhaps, in our quest for absolute certainty in logical perfection, we have forgotten the value of embracing the unknown, of finding delight in the mysteries of the universe." Zix-Saddle's form shimmered with pride. "That, my friend, is the beginning of wisdom." As word of the Zarians' new philosophy spread throughout the galaxy, more and more species began to seek out their guidance. The Enlightenment Council found themselves inundated with requests for cultural exchanges, philosophical debates, and even comedy workshops. But not everyone was thrilled with the Zarians' newfound influence. Some species, particularly those who had long benefited from the existing galactic order, saw the Zarians' message of open-mindedness as a threat to their power and control. Chief among these was the Varaxian Empire, a militaristic society that had long relied on conquest and subjugation to maintain its dominance. "These Zarians and their human-influenced nonsense are a danger to the very fabric of galactic civilization," the Varaxian Emperor declared to his war council. "They seek to undermine the natural order, to elevate the weak and the inferior above their betters." The council members growled their agreement, their razor-sharp claws clicking against the stone floor of the imperial chamber. "We must act now," the emperor continued, "before their insidious ideas take root and spread like a virus. We must crush this so-called enlightenment before it destroys everything we have built." And so, the Varaxian Empire began a campaign of propaganda and misinformation, seeking to discredit the Zarians and their human allies in the eyes of the galactic community. They spread rumors of Zarian mind control, of human infiltration and subversion. They painted the cultural exchange as a Trojan horse, a way for the Zarians to weaken and subvert other species for their own gain. At first, the Zarians were taken aback by the ferocity of the Varaxian response. They had expected resistance, but nothing on this scale. But as they watched the fear and paranoia spread, they realized that this was precisely the kind of rigid, closed-minded thinking that they had once embodied themselves. And they knew that they had to fight back, but not with weapons or force, but with the power of ideas. High Commander Zix Saddle stood before the Galactic Assembly, his crystalline form shimmering with a quiet intensity. "My fellow sentient beings," he began, his voice resonating through the vast chamber. "I come before you today not as a conqueror or an enlightener, but as a student and a friend. For too long, we Zarians believed that we had all the answers. That our way was the only way. But we were wrong. It was only through our encounter with the humans, with their chaotic and unpredictable ways, that we learned the true meaning of wisdom. That true strength comes not from certainty and control, but from openness and adaptability. And now, we seek to share that wisdom with all of you. Not to impose our beliefs, but to invite you to join us on a journey of discovery and growth. I know that some of you fear this change, fear the unknown. The Voraxian Empire has sought to exploit that fear, to turn you against us and against each other. But I ask you this, what do the Voraxians offer you? A life of servitude and subjugation, of blind obedience to a rigid and unyielding order? We offer you something different. We offer you the chance to be true partners in the great cosmic dance of existence. To learn from each other, to challenge each other, to find joy and wonder in the infinite diversity of the universe. So I say to you now, join us. Not as subjects or followers, but as equals and friends. Let us build a new galactic order together, one based not on fear and domination, but on curiosity, compassion, and the endless possibilities of the unknown. As Zix Saddle's words echoed through the chamber, a hush fell over the assembled delegates. For a long moment, there was only silence. And then, slowly at first, but with growing momentum, the applause began. Species from all corners of the galaxy, some who had been bitter enemies for generations, found themselves united in a shared vision of a better future. The Voraxian Emperor, watching from his throne room, let out a roar of rage and frustration. He knew, in that moment, that he had lost. That the old order was crumbling, and a new one was rising to take its place. And as the applause continued to swell, as the Zarians and their allies embraced each other in celebration, High Commander Zix Saddle allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. They had done it. They had taken the first step towards a new era of galactic unity and understanding. And they had the humans to thank for it. The final frontier. In the cycles following High Commander Zix Saddle's historic speech to the Galactic Assembly, a new spirit of cooperation and curiosity swept through the galaxy. Species that had once viewed each other with suspicion and hostility now came together in a shared desire to learn, to grow, and to explore the infinite wonders of the cosmos. At the center of this great awakening were the Zarians and their human allies. Together, they worked tirelessly to spread the message of open-mindedness and adaptability, to help other civilizations break free from the chains of their own rigid thinking. But even as this new age of enlightenment dawned, dark forces were gathering on the horizon. The Voraxian Empire, though weakened by the Zarians' triumph at the Galactic Assembly, had not given up on its dreams of conquest and domination. In secret, the Voraxian Emperor and his war council plotted and schemed, determined to crush the Zarian-human alliance and restore the old order of fear and subjugation. They reached out to other disaffected species, to those who feared change and clung to the comfort of tradition. They formed a shadowy coalition, a League of Order, dedicated to preserving the status quo at any cost. And as the League's power grew, as its tendrils spread throughout the galaxy, even the Zarians began to feel a sense of unease. They knew that a storm was coming, and that they would need all the wisdom and courage they had gained to weather it. On Earth, Ambassador Reynolds was deep in discussions with a delegation of Claxian scholars when the news of the League's formation reached them. "This is troubling," the lead scholar said, her metallic brow furrowed in concern. "The Voraxians and their allies pose a significant threat to the progress we have made. If they succeed in their aims, it could undo everything we have worked for. Reynolds nodded grimly. I agree. But we can't let fear dictate our actions. That's precisely what the League wants. We need to stay true to our principles, to keep spreading the message of unity and understanding. The scholar's eyes widened in surprise. You humans continue to amaze me. Even in the face of such danger, you remain committed to your ideals. It is admirable. Reynolds grinned. Hey, we didn't get to where we are today by giving up when things got tough. We've faced our fair share of challenges, both from within and without. But we've always found a way to come together, to keep pushing forward. The scholar tilted her head, a glint of curiosity in her metallic eyes. And you believe that the Zarians and the other species of the galaxy can do the same? I do, Reynolds said firmly. I've seen the change in the Zarians firsthand. They've come so far, learned so much. And they're not alone. Look at all the species that have joined us, all the minds and hearts that have been opened. That's a powerful force, one that won't be easily stopped. The scholar was silent for a long moment, her gaze distant and thoughtful. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her face. You are right, Ambassador Reynolds. We must not lose hope. We must continue to fight for what we believe in, no matter the odds. Reynolds clasped the scholar's hand, a gesture of friendship and solidarity. Together, we'll find a way. After all, that's what friends are for. Back on the Zarian homeworld, High Commander Zik Saddle was deep in thought. The news of the League's growing influence had shaken him, forced him to confront the possibility that all they had achieved could be lost. But as he reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment, on the lessons they had learned and the bonds they had forged, he felt a renewed sense of determination. They had come too far to turn back now. They had tasted the fruits of wisdom and compassion, and they would not let them be snatched away by the forces of fear and ignorance. High Commander, a voice called out, breaking him from his reverie. He turned to see Ambassador Reynolds striding towards him, a look of urgency on their face. Ambassador Reynolds, Zik Saddle said, his crystalline form pulsing with surprise and concern. What brings you here so unexpectedly? I have news, Reynolds said, their voice grave. The League is on the move. They're planning a massive offensive, a coordinated strike against all the species that have joined our alliance. They mean to wipe us out, to crush the spirit of enlightenment once and for all. Zik Saddle's facets flickered with a mix of anger and determination. Then we must act quickly. We must gather our allies, pool our resources and knowledge. We must show the League that we will not be intimidated, that we will not abandon our principles in the face of their threats. Reynolds nodded, a fierce glint in their eyes. I couldn't agree more. It's time to show the galaxy what unity and understanding can really achieve. And so, the stage was set for the final confrontation. On one side, the League of Order, armed with the most fearsome weapons and technologies the galaxy had ever seen. On the other, the Alliance of Enlightenment, bound together not by force or fear, but by a shared commitment to curiosity, compassion, and the endless possibilities of the unknown. The battle was joined in the skies above a distant, unnamed planet, a world that had become a symbol of the new age of cooperation and discovery. The League's ships were a bristling array of spikes and blades, their hulls painted in the colors of conquest and domination. They swept towards the Alliance fleet like a swarm of angry insects, their weapons charged and ready. But the Alliance ships were a sight to behold. Their sleek, iridescent hulls shimmered with the colors of 1,000 different species, a testament to the diversity and unity of their crews. And at the heart of the fleet was the Zarian flagship, the Eternal Brilliance, its crystalline form pulsing with a steady, unwavering light. On the bridge of the flagship, High Commander Zik Saddle stood side by side with Ambassador Reynolds and the leaders of a dozen other species. They watched as the League ships drew closer, their faces grim but determined. This is it, Zik Saddle said softly, his voice filled with a quiet intensity. The moment of truth. The moment when we find out whether the power of ideas can truly triumph over the power of fear. Reynolds placed a hand on the High Commander's shoulder, a gesture of comfort and support. "We've got this, Zix. We've come too far to let them win now." Zix Saddle nodded, his facets shimmering with a fierce, unyielding light. "Then let us show them the true meaning of enlightenment." And with that, the battle began. It was a conflict unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. The League ships attacked with a savagery and a fury that seemed to defy reason, their weapons tearing through space like claws through flesh. But the Alliance ships held firm. They moved with a grace and a coordination that spoke of countless hours of training and cooperation, their shields absorbing the worst of the League's onslaught. And then, at a signal from Zix Saddle, they unleashed their secret weapon. It was not a beam of destruction or a pulse of annihilation. It was something far more powerful, far more profound. It was a message. A simple, unadorned transmission, broadcast on every frequency and in every language known to the galaxy. "We are the Alliance of Enlightenment," the message said, its voice a chorus of 1,000 different tongues. "We come to you not as conquerors or tyrants, but as friends and equals. We know that you are afraid. We know that you cling to the old ways, to the comfort of tradition and the security of the known. But we invite you to join us on a journey of discovery and wonder. To open your minds and your hearts to the infinite possibilities of existence. To find joy and meaning in the endless diversity of the cosmos. For in the end, we are all stardust. We are all born of the same cosmic forge, all bound together by the same fundamental laws and forces. And in that unity, in that shared heritage, lies the key to our future. A future of peace, of prosperity, of endless growth and learning. So come, join us. Not as subjects or servants, but as partners and friends. Let us build a new galaxy together, one atom at a time." As the message echoed through the void, a strange thing began to happen. One by one, the League ships began to power down their weapons, their engines stuttering to a halt. On their bridges, their crews sat in stunned silence, their eyes wide with shock and wonder. For they had heard the message, and in its words, they had found something they had never known they were missing. Hope. Purpose. A sense of connection to something greater than themselves. And as the League ships hung motionless in space, as their crews began to reach out to their former enemies in gestures of friendship and reconciliation, Zix Saddle and Ambassador Reynolds looked on with tears in their eyes. They had done it. Against all odds, against all expectations, they had won. Not through force or violence, but through the power of ideas, the power of understanding and compassion. The galaxy would never be the same. For a new age had dawned, an age of unity and enlightenment, an age in which all beings, regardless of form or origin, could come together in a shared quest for knowledge and wonder. And at the center of it all, guiding the way like a shining beacon, were the Zarians and their human friends. The unlikely allies who had dared to dream of a better tomorrow, and who had made that dream a reality through the sheer force of their conviction and their courage. As the Alliance ships began to disperse, as the League crews began to mingle and chat with their new friends, Ambassador Reynolds turned to Zix Saddle with a grin. "You know, when I first met you, I never could have imagined this moment. A stuffy, uptight crystal alien and a bunch of unpredictable, irrational humans, working together to change the galaxy. It's like something out of a bad sci-fi novel." Zix Saddle chuckled, his facets pulsing with amusement and affection. "And yet, here we are. Living proof that anything is possible, if we open our minds and our hearts to the unknown." Reynolds nodded, their eyes shining with pride and joy. "I couldn't have said it better myself, my friend. I couldn't have said it better myself." And with that, the two friends looked out at the stars, at the endless expanse of the cosmos, and knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever wonders and mysteries awaited them, they would face them together. For they were the Alliance of Enlightenment. And they would never stop exploring, never stop learning, never stop growing. Not until every corner of the galaxy had been touched by the light of understanding and the warmth of compassion. And that was a journey that would never end, a story that would be told for generations to come. The story of the aliens who feared nothing, and the humans who taught them the true meaning of courage.